Hello and welcome to Founders of the Future, the podcast making emerging technologies accessible to anyone. My name is Joe Mardell, and in this podcast I interview founders of technology startups who are pioneering our future using emerging technologies to create new industries, business models and opportunities. In this episode I will be speaking with Jakub Krcmar, who is the co-founder and CEO of Veracity Protocol, the new security standard of fingerprinting physical objects. He has also co-founded multiple startups in his career. He co-founded ONEPROVE and Stellar Bold and was also a partner and CPO at ARTSTAQ. He has worked on over 200 web and mobile products as a user experience and user interface professional, director and head of product, leading teams for clients like World Press Photo, UNICEF and Amnesty International. So it's great to have you with me today, and to start off with, would you like to just talk a little bit about your company, the journey of how you set it up, what do you guys do, and just introduce your company?
Sure, thanks for having me, Joe. So my company is called Veracity Protocol. What we are building is basically standard of trust for physical objects, which means to really connect physical and digital in order to really prevent counterfeiting, fraud, and manipulation. We basically developed our own technology based on computer vision and machine learning that really enables any camera or smartphone to create a digital fingerprint based on items, material, structure. So this removes a need for barcodes, RFIDs, and other embedded security elements, and really allows anyone to pick up a phone or use, off-the-shelf industrial cameras and be able to verify any items or products, be it a final product, a part which goes into airplane or server motherboard. What's its true identity? Is it authentic, or is there any anomaly, or has there been any manipulation, or by simply taking a picture?
Absolutely. I mean, fraud and counterfeit are huge problems in the world today. Many industries are literally bleeding money and losing reputation because of people using fake products or tampering with their products. So it's a really great solution that you guys have built to try and solve that problem.
Thank you.
So I'm really interested to hear not just about the story of Veracity, but also about your entrepreneurial journey and how you kind of found yourself interested in starting companies. How did that all pan out?
Sure. If I start all the way back, so I've been entrepreneur since 15 years old. I started, as many people did, by building websites, later more complex web services and mobile apps, which then transitioned into a position where I was leading developers and designers and working on a big projects. All the way in the beginning, my path to entrepreneurship started with really defying authorities and always being the problematic person. I almost didn't finish a high school, and my parents needed to push me to finish it and go to university, which I selected one just to be able to focus on work. So it would be easy enough to do. And really the beginnings are there, where my biggest strength and knowledge was the ability to put together digital products and to realize people's vision into something tangible, be it a complex web service or a mobile app or basically anything like that. And as I was going through my journey, and as a contractor, working on big projects, living in various countries, from Turkey to Israel, US, Belgium, working on projects for Amnesty International, UNICEF, and others. I also had a short experience in Dubai, where we were building a boutique design studio, which was an experiment, a good experience, which I then used to decide never to do business development in Dubai again. But that's another story. And after that, which was around 5 years ago, and almost 6 years ago, I met Roman, who's one of other co-founders at the Veracity Protocol. And he, that time, was building art exchange for artworks, to trade artworks, without physically touching them, based on data set, automated valuation based on data sets, and so on and so on. And he was looking exactly for someone to materialize his vision, which was how he found me through recommendation. And as we start building this together as as founders, I also learned what it truly takes to be entrepreneur. I was thinking I had entrepreneurial mindset, but I had a lot of hard lessons on the journey. Roman has been a great mentor to me, and it was a great journey which prepared me for Veracity Protocol. And the transition there was really through, 2 years in, we were looking at the artworks and how to solve the issue of counterfeits, where you have very expensive artworks which are being returned from like exhibition, and how to make sure it's still the same item, since it can be replaced by a perfect copy. Which modern technologies are more and more democratized, and there's even before people were making perfect copies. How to make sure it's the same item, how to really connect it to the digital, its digital identity or blockchain or whatever. And so we were looking at all these solutions, RFID chips, DNA tags, diamond dust, even crazier things. And we saw really all of them suck, because they can be removed, cloned, tampered with, or they require special hardware, or you need to be expert to understand how to use them, or they're very expensive. And most of them, since it's embedded security elements, they have two basic issues. They are not, you are connecting the embedded element to a digital identity, not that physical object itself, so you can still replace that physical object. And second, it's invasive. And on many artworks, like, they won't allow you to put anything onto or into it, right? If you put it in frame, then like, what's the point? So, and we were thinking there's to be much easier, simpler solution, considering the artwork itself down to level of microns, its material structure. You cannot really replicate that, it's impossible. So why not use computer vision through, simple comparison, and have like solution for that. And we explored there's no solutions like that. So we had the hypothesis to validate, where I created the first data set, research universities in Czech Republic to go to, and to validate the hypothesis. And we succeeded in Brno Technological University, where we found Kamil, our third co-founder, who's extremely experienced computer vision machine learning expert, with whom we validated the hypothesis and then started company. Initially in art sector, which was another big lesson. It's obviously a market ripe for a solution like this, but once you spend longer time in there, you realize it's a very innovation resistant area, where things move very slowly, and a lot of people wants to keep things opaque. And thanks to our investors, Tensor Ventures, which are deep tech investors with Intel connections, we start doing POCs in airspace, on security documents, IDs, on server motherboards. And it gave us the insight that this has much more interesting applications beyond art, for much more interesting reasons. Not only to solve issues of counterfeits, but actually, protect people's lives and national securities. And that's where we start pivoting the company, and became Veracity Protocol, went through Techstars Accelerator last year for 3 months. It was like the best decision we ever made, and growing ever since.
Great. Yeah, there's a lot there. That was really, really interesting. And it's great to see that you've always been a problem solver since a young age. Seem to be a very naturally taken to entrepreneurship. And so when you've been working on Veracity Protocol, you started off looking to solve the problem of counterfeit in the arts industry, and then you've moved on to looking at a wider range of different problems to help more and more different people, which is really, really exciting.
Yeah.
And you said about how with art, a lot of the time you wouldn't be able to just use the traditional methods because they wouldn't like you to put stuff actually on the artwork. So that's why you needed your solution using the AI computer vision. But
Yeah.
how does that relate to the other industries where they might not be so precious about the actual item and you might have got away with using one of the traditional methods? What is it what is it about your company that solves an additional problem?
That's actually an excellent question. And obviously, this is a solution which is exponential improvement in both of accuracy, security, costs, because it doesn't really cost anything. It's software. You don't need to change anything on the product and in the manufacturing. But still, there's no really importance and urgency in simple sectors like CPG. You won't be going into a shop and scanning $100 sneakers to check if they are original. We much rather focus on where really there's an important and urgent use case, which is exactly either items of very high value, artworks, collectibles, but it could be anything, or very high security risk. For example, like server motherboards, which goes into DoD or Apple's infrastructure. And so we are basically identifying use cases which would fall into these categories or where the current solutions cannot function. So mostly these are for big companies manufacturing some parts which are getting counterfeited, where they actually have very big counterfeiting tangible issue which is hurting them on several fronts. And the current solution cannot really solve it. One of the companies we are working with, they're using, for example, their product like uncopyable QR codes, which still are copyable with resolution enough, but most of the issue is more secure you want to make them, the more finer entropy you need to print on them, and harder it is to actually scan it and verify it. So when applied on items which are, for example, rounded, or where there are more wild conditions to verify it, it just doesn't work. And it's still very expensive to do because there's still a sticker to do, right? So there will be like another good example where it makes a good sense. So hopefully that gives you some idea.
Yeah, definitely. That explains a lot. I can see how there's definitely a need for a more modern way of tracking products and making sure that products aren't being counterfeited or changed in any way. And I can see that you use a number of different technologies to actually make that happen. You use blockchain to keep your system secure, and you use AI computer vision to make the fingerprint of the physical object. So can you just talk a little bit more about how that works, how those technologies kind of come together to make your system work?
Yeah. So basically, we are working with the physical object itself in two ways. One is individual protection. So each individual product would be protected either at the manufacturer or by anyone, at any point of the supply chain. You basically take a high resolution image of the surface, either at one spot, several spots, or the whole area, really depending on the use case. And later on, you use that to compare if it's really that item or not. And you use that to secure veracity of all the track and trace data. So, when then you can trust that those data were really entered at the moment where that item has been verified as that object, meaning there was access there. So that minimize any, middleman attacks in that area. And the block serves a great purpose for blockchain, because blockchain itself is just another database. It doesn't really solve any issue by itself. What it's missing is that connection to the digital the twin of that product and to the object itself, which is served by our technology, in this case by actually that fingerprint we take, which we call physical code, when it's hashed into blockchain or even stored as a whole image file. So we can make sure, you know, the original is used for the verification, and that secures then the immutability of that data. And second use case is like where we protect the whole product line or batch of items or something which is used across items, like a label. We just based on few dozens of samples, we would create an algorithm which then represents the whole product line, even retrospectively, and would tell you if the item is generally authentic or not. And then again, you can combine it with like individual serialization if that would, you know, solve the issues you are facing. So it can be very creative and solve a lot of like challenges and use cases in this way. And it is all based on just computer vision, machine learning, you know, training neural networks and using existing cameras and smartphones to do this. Where is our biggest strength? The ability to work in wild conditions, meaning, you know, different cameras, different light conditions, angle, even when the material changes or gets damaged. And that's kind of a holy grail, which we've been able to have a breakthrough with, and allows us to have such applicability.
Yeah, that's really interesting, and I love the fact that you can use all kinds of different cameras to collect the data. So you can do it on a smartphone, or you could use cameras in industry on the production line to collect data from there specifically. How does it actually work on the smartphone? Because I know you've got an app that you use. So how does that work on the smartphone? Can you just talk about that?
We have several apps which, you know, we are B2B focused, so we allow our partners and customers to use them, integrate them, you know, white label them, and then it works where you just open the app, it would recognize the object, it would use augmented reality to show you how to guide it, how close to camera to take it, would take picture automatically, and then do the verification either in the cloud or even on device.
Great, yeah, so that's really cool that you're using augmented reality as well. So all kinds of different emerging technologies. That's the sort of thing that we love to see on this podcast. Really great to see that. So so the progress that you've made so far with Veracity Protocol is really astonishing, I have to say. I can see that you're working with some pretty big players already. As far as I know, 2019 was a really big year for you. You made quite a few positive steps forward, and you might have partnered up with some certain people.
That's correct. 2019 was mostly for us to really still explore and try a lot of use cases, explore a lot of verticals, and gain enough experience and knowledge to narrow down our focus and expand on, you know, what's really making sense, which this whole year is about. And yes, we closed a partnership with, for example, with NFL PA in US to protect sports memorabilia and rights of players. And lastly, in March, we were introduced as a partner of Intel for securing their transparent supply chain. It was at the RSA conference when there were still conferences.
Yeah.
And so that would be like the major ones, and we have a lot more, of course, since then, and more to come.
Great, yeah, that's really amazing. I mean, Intel is one of the biggest players, really, so that's a really good step forward. And I also saw that you're working with some other like Fortune 500 companies. Am I right in saying that you've been working with Microsoft and Amazon a little bit?
So we have Microsoft as our business partner. There was a partnership which is starting from Czech Republic and expanding globally for them to resell our solution and co-join some business development projects. which we have right now. And with Amazon, this is mostly now connected to AWS and their help with using the infrastructure, but cannot really expand more on on that
Sure,
one.
yeah, no, I
And
understand.
with the business relationship, we have several Fortune 500 companies. We are working on use cases and contracts right now. So hopefully we'll be able to unveil those during this year.
Very impressive stuff. I look forward to hearing more about that in the rest of this year. So I'll be keeping tuned to see what happens there. So yeah, we've talked about the different technologies that you use. There's AI, there's blockchain, AR, and there was also something that I came across when I was researching for this interview, which was a term, AOT. I hadn't actually come across that before. Obviously, I'm aware of IoT, the Internet of Things, but you talk about something called AOT, authenticity of things. Would you mind just explaining what that means, Greg, for us, please?
Sure. There was a concept of generally approaching the authenticity of products and the whole infrastructure we would be building around it. It was a concept from the older product offering, and labeling, which we don't really use that much anymore. But generally, the idea is really building infrastructure and platform to allow anyone to verify and secure their products as like a stepping stone to, of course, many more use cases and areas, from quality assurance to detecting tampering to immutable digital twins. So would be general name for that infrastructure in the area.
Sure. Yeah, I can see that the whole market around validating the authenticity of products and trying to solve these problems is really growing quite rapidly. I can see that's going to be an area of huge opportunities in the future, and it's great to see that you guys are pioneering that whole way of doing things. So
That's correct.
So you've talked about some of your services that you offer. You talked about using your computer vision to make a visual, to make a fingerprint of physical objects. And what sort of other services do you offer? Do you have specific services that you would use for different types of industry or different types of product?
Yeah, in generally, those would be which I basically went over already.
Mm-hmm.
Since computer vision solution, we can expand to be able to do identification just based on the material structure. On top of authentication, we can automate it. We can automate any authenticity. Sorry, we can automate any anomalies and detecting anomalies and doing QA, and also detecting tampering, for example, malicious chips on a server motherboard, and create immutable digital twins, which we call immutable twins, really the ability to connect the object itself to the database to allow for secure track and trace.
Great. Yeah, I mean, growth for your company has been really great so far. You're still quite a young startup, but progress that you've made is very very impressive. What sort of numbers are you looking at now in terms of people? You seem to have grown your team quite a lot in the last year or so. How's that been for you, the hiring process and growing your teams?
Yeah, we are around, right now we are around 22 people with around 15, 16 full-time. We are quite distributed, remote from the beginning. We have very specific culture, which we use to select the right people into the company. So I would say that's definitely this culture DNA process we use for growth. But of course, once you get over 20 and start then going to 100, that requires very different changes and processes, right? Thankfully, we have people in the team experience in building even 100 plus and more teams. So we will be getting our experience from using our experience there to go forward and then really see. So I would say the key is really always the culture itself, and logically the culture comes from founders. It's what they do, what they say, how they apply things, if they really keep up on their words and their mindset. So that's like the number one. Try to lead by example and show we can do mistakes as well. We are humans, and have very flat hierarchy. So that would be for now, but I believe with bigger company, you need to change pretty much everything.
Yeah, that's a really, really great point. I think culture is 100% the key to growing a startup. It's really interesting to see how you approach that. And you talk about your culture being quite specific. You've built your culture in quite a specific way to help with that process. So how would you describe that way that you have intended to build the culture?
We a lot of almost everyone on the team is having entrepreneurial mindset. Those are very successful people which already built companies before, had a successful app, made money while working on big projects. They also want to work on something meaningful and under their own rules and conditions. We have extremely talented developers which just want to live in a small city close to mountains, go for mountain bike, or another one wants to travel a lot, but they still do a great work, and they don't want to work in big corporations because they would be stranded there, or they wouldn't be able to work on something really exciting, right? It's also about helping, making sure everyone is growing, asking them, are you growing professionally, or are you doing mundane tasks? What are the things you want to expand on and learn? And another important one would be definitely like owning things, owning the project, being responsible and accountable for what you do, what you own, what you say, being also very clear about the rules, which wouldn't be like document listed, but more like the culture itself, right? What people feel like, sure. Which then feels kind of or makes the team to be able to like self-manage it. And if there's someone out of that culture or misbehaving, so it has kind of auto clearing process by itself. So I would say this would be some of the key highlights from our culture here at Veracity.
Yeah, I love the fact that you give your team members quite a bit of flexibility and a bit of freedom with where they work and how they approach their work. I think that's a really, really good forward-thinking mindset in regards to remote working, which is quite fitting considering what's going on at the moment. And I'm sure your team members really appreciate being trusted with being able to work remotely as well. It must be quite good for the culture to put that trust in your teams.
Yeah,
for sure,
exactly.
For sure. I'm sure.
I would say there's one example. When, for example, one teammate is done with work that day, or doesn't really have anything important, just goes out and have a trip, or do something else. There won't be anyone blasting him about it. But also I know when there's like important delivery or deployment, those people work like crazy over weekend or night without even, asking them. They do it automatically because they like to, they are excited about it. And I believe once you would start pushing them, you're working from 8 hours a day, and if you don't have anything to do, then you need tasks to do and have some meaningful tasks. And of course, those people won't be then helping you over the weekend and doing this, spontaneous work where they are actually working through night or weekend, but being excited about it because they chose to and they want to, not because they have to. So it's like one important thing about it. Of course, also links to that you need to have some proper self-management, right? You need to be able to be reliable. Not everyone is built in this way, right? A lot of people are damaged by the society, school, or normal companies. It takes them some time to get back into a normalcy, because for me that's a normal state. So yeah, there'll be some insights there.
It sounds like a pleasure to work for your company. I really do like the way that you do things there. Um, thanks for telling me all about that. It's been a pleasure to talk to you. I really appreciate you coming on the podcast. I think it's just about time to finish up, so I'll call it a day here. But thanks again for coming on the podcast. It's really been a pleasure, and it's been fascinating to hear what you've got to say.
Thanks, Joe. Was my pleasure. Take care.
Thanks. Take care. I'll speak to you again soon.